Welcome, everybody. All right, it's the holiday season. Have you noticed? Man, I mean, as soon as you get out into the world, it's like Christmas music has happened, and it seems like just last week was Thanksgiving, which was pretty close to the truth this year. Anyway, here we are, and I want to start with a story. And the story is there's an old man and his grandson, and they've got a donkey. The donkey is carrying their load, and they hear a couple of people scoffing, saying, "Geez, donkeys are made for riding." So, well, okay. So the grandfather takes his grandson, puts the grandson on top of the donkey. They get a few more strides along, and then all of a sudden they hear, "Man, look at that child. He's making that old man walk." And so, well, okay. So the grandfather takes his grandson down, gets up on the donkey himself, gets a few more strides, and all of a sudden, oh, geez, look at that. The grandfather there is making his grandson walk around while he rides that donkey. What? And so, okay, the grandfather then grabs the grandson, sets him in front of him on the donkey, and they go along a few more steps, and all of a sudden they hear, "Man, look at that. What brutal beasts they're treating that donkey, making him carry everything in the world. They're going to break his back." So they both get off the donkey. They grab their stuff, put it on their backs, tie up the donkey's feet, put him on a stick, start carrying the donkey around. And then all of a sudden they get a few more steps, and they're like, "Man, look at what a waste of a perfectly good donkey. That thing could be carrying their load for 'em." And they give up. They don't know what to do. Now, have you ever felt similar to this? Not in the same situation, but have you ever felt like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, no matter what effort you put in, it's just not good enough for people. It's just not good enough, and we're not measuring up. I tend to find that that's how the holiday season has become for many of us. It becomes this red zone, as we're calling it here this season, this red zone of stress, where we are encountered moment by the next set of expectations and the next deadline and the next whatever it is. And in that whole process, we lose a lot, right? Not only do we lose connection with what the season is, ideally intended to be, but we also lose our health oftentimes. So my first slide here is, what are the holidays all about? Well, what are they supposed to be all about? And most of us would come up with a list that looks like this: peace, love, joy, celebration, connection, reflection. It's this period of time where historically the days are getting as short as they've ever been, the nights are getting as long as they'll ever be, and we have this opportunity to rest some, to relax, to celebrate the coming of the next year, all of this sort of stuff. That is historically what this season was for. Now, what have they become, or what are they? What is this season often now? The holidays are often now not about peace, joy, and love, but more about franticness, being overscheduled, one thing after the other, which, by the way, is why we changed this presentation from 6 p.m. tonight to 4:30 p.m. tonight, because as I was looking at our schedule, over the weekend, it was like, oh my goodness, I've got 2 things to do at 6 o'clock tonight. So thank you for bearing with me, and hopefully many of you who were planning on being here live are able to check out the replay, either on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. And ultimately that comes down to stress. In fact, all of the regions of the United States identify the holidays as the most stressful time of the year. But interesting to me, at least, is that in the Midwest, we rate it highest. The highest of all the different regions, we rank highest in the stress level that the holidays brings us. So we're right in the heart of this season that, ideally would be all about these wonderful things and joy and relaxation and connection and, again, celebration and all of this, whether that's celebration of family, celebration of faith, whatever that means to people at this time of year. and we turn it into this tremendously stressful, overscheduled time where we have this set of expectations that oftentimes we don't even have defined, and we're attempting to meet everybody where they think we need to be. Kind of like the man and the boy going through town with the donkey, right? That is the holiday red zone. So look at this. Now, my apologies on not being able to get this up on in big format on my edit on the YouTube video that we'll post. I'll do my best to put this graphic right here. But what this graphic shows is it is a graphic of U.S. cardiac deaths by day of the year, and on either end is the middle of the summer. June 30th, July 1st, June 30th, July 1st on the ends. And right there in the middle, if you can see on my TV screen there, if you can see that peak, that is Christmas and New Year's. It's that holiday week, basically the 2 weeks, week and a half of the holidays, peaks us out with cardiac deaths in the United States. And it's a drastic change. It is a drastic change. Now, you know, like my background in nutrition and biology and biochemistry and physiology says, oh, well, yeah, this is the time of year where, you know, the sun isn't out the most, so we're not making the most vitamin D, and so on and so forth. But a very quick close look at this, and that's ridiculous, because for the months following, all the way up until, you know, even April, we're not making vitamin D, so it's not a vitamin D issue. We've got this tremendous peak right there, and then about 3.5 to 4 months later, another peak. What happens then? Taxes. So we've got like the holidays, which is by far the most effect on cardiac deaths in the United States, followed shortly behind by tax time, and then things chill out pretty good. And through the middle of the year, the summer, it's the lowest that we have in that. I think it is a very telling graph about the amount of stress and change that's happening in a person's life during the holidays, which draws out the question then, well, why does that happen? Why does mental stress cause cardiac death, perhaps? Well, the reality is you can't have mental stress without it being physiologic stress. And I'm going to explain that in much more detail here in just a moment. We need to understand the acute stress response, and then we need to understand how chronic stress plays into that factor. When we look at acute stress, it's going to be very clear what's happening inside our body. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about our attitude in the face of real adversity. So we need to understand, first off, perspective. Are things truly adverse? Are we really going through adversity? Or is it adversity that we are perceiving and that's being either put upon us or that we're taking upon ourselves? We're going to talk about our alignment with our 4 limited resources. We're going to identify what our 4 limited resources are, and then we're going to talk about how to align those things in a way that's much more congruent with how we want to live. And then we're going to talk about equipping for change. We're going to talk today, train today about how we can do things differently this holiday season, which is why I'm doing this on the 5th of October instead of the 23rd of October, or I'm sorry, the 5th of December instead of the 23rd of December here. All right, hopefully you can get a look at that. What we've got here is a picture. We've got a picture of a massive great white shark. And that great white shark is chasing a seal that is leaping out of the way. That is leaping to get out of the way of the great white shark. Now, that, my friends, is real adversity. That seal can do 2 things. It can fight or it can flee. And let me tell you what, I don't think the seal is going to win the fight. So the seal really has one option. It has to get away from that great white shark. And in order to do that, it needs to kick into a different state of physiology than it has at any other time in its existence. And here's what happens then during that fight or flight response. In an acute situation where the stress is short-lived, we go through a rapid, tremendous change in our body. There's a perceived stimulus or a threat. There are stress hormones that are immediately released to be fast-acting. These things flood our system in order to create a response that trigger a response that goes into what we call fight or flight physiology. Not what we call, what is called fight or flight physiology. During fight or flight physiology, the blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, blood sugar goes up, blood lipids or blood fat goes up, clotting factors go up. All of these things have very good reason, of course. What also happens is, if my technology comes along with me, come on now. There we go. The eyes dilate, muscles contract, breathing rate increases, our focus narrows, or the seal's focus narrows. It has one thing it needs to keep its mind on, and that is getting away from the shark. Vision and hearing sharpens. It needs to be very perceptive of its immediate environment. But long-term memory, completely reduced. It doesn't need to be thinking about that sort of thing right now. The immune system, down-regulated. Doesn't need to spend energy on that right now. Digestive system, down-regulated, doesn't need to spend energy on that right now. Reproductive system, down-regulated, does not need to spend energy on that right now. And this system is perfectly designed, perfectly suited when we can get away from the stress. It's perfectly suited for that because it ramps up every cell in our body for one purpose: survival in the moment. Survival in the moment. That's what happens in this acute stress response. Now, here's the chronic stress response. And I know that on Facebook, this is going to be a really small picture, but let me just tell you, in a chronic stress response, everything's the same. It's the same picture. So, what happens? Blood pressure, heart rate, blood sugar, blood fats, clotting factors go up, eyes dilate, muscles contract, breathing rate increases, our focus narrows, our vision and our hearing sharpens, long-term memory goes out the window, our immune system goes down, our digestive system goes down, reproduction system down-regulated. All of these things happen in the chronic stress response also, because the body only has one stress response. And that one stress response is the acute stress response. The difference is when we encounter stress after stress after stress after stress, whether those are real or they're perceived, it creates the same physiologic response, and that's chronic stress when we have it continually like that. So again, the system is designed perfectly when we can get away from that stress. But what if that stress is a bad job, a bad relationship, constant deadlines, or the holiday season, which now extends for months at a time, right? What if it's those things? Now, we've got a lot to think about here, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't get any more notifications there from while we're doing the Facebook. So that chronic stress response is what I think is useful to know about as we go through life, because oftentimes we go, oh no, it's all in my head. It's all in my head. You know, we feel stressed, and because we've been taught that our mentality is different than our physiology, that we say, oh, it's all in my head. And we don't think that those two things are connected. But remember that cardiac death chart? Do you remember this? That cardiac death chart means, oh, no, these things are not all in your head. These things are also in every cell of your body. This response is in every cell of your body. And that is a really big deal. It is a really big deal, because when we have that, all of those stress response pieces are happening, and the longer we have that, the more we're breaking down our systems, the more we're breaking down our cellular health, and the more we break down our overall health, and that leads to chronic disease. which, by the way, is killing 80% of Americans right now. And that is not just a statistic drawn out of nowhere. That statistic is, last year, around 80% of death certificates were signed with a chronic disease as the cause of death. 80% of all Americans who died had some sort of chronic disease that was the cause of death. And that, to me, is a travesty. Because a good Yale study years back showed that 70% of those deaths were preventable with lifestyle change. So, what do we need to do here? How do we do this? I like to discuss the stress response also in a way that we've experienced, right? So imagine sitting at a movie. You're at a movie, it is you're just hanging out, you got your snacks, and you're watching a movie because you chose to show up and pay somebody money to sit here at this movie. And let's say it's a horror movie, which I'm not sure why people do this to themselves, but they do. They're a very popular genre, right? And people show up and they're doing just fine, and all of a sudden terrifying things happen on the screen, right? Well, what happens to your heart rate? What happens to your breathing rate? What do you think happens to your eyes? They dilate. Your breathing rate goes up, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. What happens to your digestion? It actually gets downregulated. Immune system gets downregulated. You go into the stress response. And we all can understand this. We've felt our hearts racing when we've been scared by something, even though we know this is on a screen, I'm in a controlled room, there's nothing going to happen to me here in this theater. But we've experienced that stress response kick in. And that, I think, is a great example of how that happens, whether it's things that are real, like that seal in the great white shark, or whether things that are perceived, like the scene and the sounds that are happening in the movie. When we have this long-term chronic stress, we get what's called the sustained adaptive physiology response, or what we call allostasis. We have sustained stress, so our body is now working to adapt to that. We get these elevated stress hormones, cortisol, insulin, what they call neuropeptide Y. These things aren't that important to know the details of, but stress hormones go up. Those stress hormones trigger fat storage in our omentum, or our gut, right around our middle. Does this sound familiar to any Americans? And the research is super clear about how this response affects our bodies. It's very, very clear. So we know that it happens. Now we get to talk about, all right, well, what's the next step that we do? Because all of these things create systemic inflammation. And of course, we've all heard it so many times. Inflammation is the root cause of all chronic disease. Actually, it's the root physiologic expression of the stress that causes all the chronic disease that we have. And that then also alters gene expression. So our actual genetics, our DNA, is being expressed in ways that are well designed, again, to get us away from acute stress, but they are not beneficial to us when we are experiencing that stress time and time and time again. So, where does the stress come from? Well, if you've paid attention to me for any amount of time and checked out any of my blog posts or checked out any of my videos on YouTube, or however you've seen me live, been a practice member of mine, you know that we work in a three-dimensional model. And stress comes from how we eat, how we move, and how we think. That's where our stress comes from. And today we're talking about how we think, because that is a primary factor in this holiday season. But I will be flat out honest, the holiday season is a trifecta of stress. We change most things in our life about how we move, how we eat, and how we think during this season. So we have to think about our domains, the physical, chemical, emotional domains. We have to think about those things as if we have nutrients for each domain. These are things that are required by the body, and they must be provided by our lifestyle choices. If they are provided, all these nutrients, physically, chemically, and emotionally, if they are provided by our lifestyle choices in abundance regularly, then we have the greatest opportunity to express vibrant, robust health. If, however, they're not provided by our lifestyle, we become deficient in these things, And we have a greater chance of losing health and therefore expressing sickness. So that's the model there. When we talk about toxicity, this is easy to think about when we think about the biochemical dimension. What we eat, what we drink, what we get exposed to in our environment. Toxicity is easy to think about like that. But in the emotional department, oftentimes we're not thinking about it quite that clearly, although the language in our culture is there. You know, we have toxic relationships, toxic friends, you know, toxic situations that we get into at work or socially, you know, whatever that might be. Toxicity are these things that we encounter physically, chemically, and emotionally that are innately poison. They are innately working against our better health. These things, of course, are ideal to be avoided in our lifestyle, but if we choose to consume toxins, and again, that's not just a biochemical consumption, that's physically, chemically, and emotionally. If we choose to consume toxins or take part in these behaviors regularly, toxicity develops. We become toxic, and then our body kicks into, what is it? The stress response. Absolutely. We kick into that stress response, and our adaptive physiology and our adaptive behaviors develop. And that becomes the road to chronic disease. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's see if, sorry, my remote is there. So we go into survival mode. And I've already talked to people this holiday season about how they just want to survive the holidays. And it's like, oh man, you know, I feel like this often, to be honest. And it's something that I work against and work for finding more peace and more joy and more enjoyment of the season. But that survival mode is something that many, many Americans relate to. And when we then think about, okay, our lifestyle, where are those toxicities coming from? We have to think physically, chemically, and emotionally. So let's talk briefly about the physical toxicity. Is this holiday season the time to skip your exercise or to do your exercise, right? It seems like a silly rhetorical question, and probably it is, but I think it's worth being conscious of. If there's a time of the year to skip your regular exercise habit, this is not it, right? The middle of the summer is it, frankly, because we're not under tremendous amounts of other stress, you know, according to the data. So get that regular exercise in. If you're not currently an exerciser, please start a walking habit. You know, don't go crazy and become a CrossFitter or something like that right now during the holiday season, but at least get out and move, because there are ample opportunities to be sitting in cars, in planes, you know, sitting at parties, you know, whatever it might be during this season. There's plenty of time to be sedentary during this season. When we think about the biochemical end of things, wow, I mean, the holiday season is a unique beast in that we start in really October 31st. You know, we start around right around the Halloween holiday, and then that is closely followed by, you know, all of the different Thanksgiving feasts and goodies and treats and things that are out there, followed by an entire month of, you know, office parties and social get-togethers and family gatherings around the Christmas holiday and all the other holidays right there around the solstice. All of these things are biochemical bombs for us, right? We usually tremendously increase our sugar intake. We tremendously increase our grain and refined sugar intake with that. Our alcohol intake oftentimes goes up. Just our general intake of all things processed tends to go up for this long extended period, and that creates a stress response. It adds to the stresses that we're under, and it keeps us in that chronic stress mode for a long period of time, which is why, again, cardiac deaths peak at the holidays. Right at the holidays. It's not just that those 2 weeks are super stressful, and they are for sure, but it's the build up to them, followed by them, and then there's a decline after that as we recover from the stress that we've been under. Now, I like to encourage people to think about their life as a cobblestone road. And each of those stones in the road are the different elements of your lifestyle. They're the different pieces of your life that you have there. So it's your family connection, it's your spiritual connection, it's how you're eating, it's how you're moving and exercising, it's, you know, the things that you're drinking, it's the ways that you're responding to the situation in your life. All of those things are the cobblestones that make up the road. And we have to, in order to have a smooth progression of life along this road, all those stones need to be in the road. If they are not in the road, or if they're broken, or if they're cracked or whatever, we end up with this wonky, off-balance travel through it that's oftentimes needs to be slower and less comfortable and less productive than what it would be if we keep in mind all of those different pieces and make sure that we have the appropriate elements in our lifestyle. We're going to work on one more analogy for the day, and that is the bucket. I use the bucket analogy in a lot of different ways in my practice. This is the time where I'm talking about the emotional component of the bucket, right? And in that bucket, we fill it up with stuff. Our attitude, it can be defined as a pattern of thinking that we've developed over time. We fill that bucket over time based on what our attitude is. We bioaccumulate attitude. Again, we think about that when we think about lead, or we think about asbestos, or, you know, some other environmental toxins. But we don't oftentimes think about that in emotional components. So we bioaccumulate our attitude. So we need to think about what has influenced our attitude. Who has influenced our attitude? So what things have happened in our lives that have affected how we see the world? Who have we been influenced by in our lifetimes that influences how we see the world? The bigger question, I believe, is who gets to choose the attitude? Now, I talk with high school students oftentimes. I go out to the local high schools and teach classes from time to time. And one of the things that I'm always talking about, three-dimensional health. I'm always talking about how chiropractic care plays into that, which I'll mention here in a moment. But with the situation that I always talk about is, okay, you're driving down the road, everything's going fine, and you are coming up to an intersection, but it's not one you have to stop at. You can just keep cruising by. You got your 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and you're going at it, and a car pulls out and slows down in front of you. Just, you know, cruising along, maybe 40 miles an hour. Makes you slow down, makes everybody behind you slow down. You've been in that situation, I'm guessing. Now, what I ask the students is, does that person make you mad? And what do you think the response I get is? Invariably, the response is like, oh, yeah, that makes me mad, you know, oh, this and that. And I say, really? Like, that person made you mad? Oh, yeah, well, they didn't need to pull out in front of me, and so on and so forth. Like, did you know who that person is? Like, well, no, I don't know who that person is. Do they know who you are? Well, no, they don't know who I am. Okay, well, how did they make you mad? Well, what they did made me mad. Really? And so usually I pry this until somebody goes, oh, wait a minute, I get it. They didn't make me mad. I got mad at the situation. I chose to be mad in that scenario. And this is exactly the case. However, because of our conditioning and because of how we've been taught throughout our society, those influences to our attitude, we've relegated the responsibility of our own attitude to some other set of things that we've been taught are the appropriate responses to certain situations. And we've been taught the appropriate response to that situation is to get upset, and that therefore the situation is what made us upset. No, not at all the case, right? We made ourselves upset because there are other ways that we could respond to that very same situation, right? We could respond to that situation with gratitude. That person could pull out. We could say to ourselves, oh, well, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to slow down and see what was going on in greater detail. Oh, I wouldn't have noticed that beautiful tree there if I wouldn't have been slowed down by this situation. I would have just kept cruising on. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity for that. Is that a possible response? Absolutely, it's a possible response. Is it a common response? No, because our attitudes have been influenced in a way, like I mentioned, that we have determined earlier our responses to certain situations, and so we just do that without ever being conscious of it and thinking of it. So, who gets to choose? Of course, you get to choose your attitude. Now, let's keep thinking about this bucket, because we accumulate this stuff in our bucket. And what we know becomes those are our innate values. These are the things that we don't necessarily have to be taught. What we think are our belief systems. And beliefs are very, very powerful things, because our behaviors are based on our beliefs. How we think is our attitude. So again, the immediate response to anger or the immediate response to gratitude is how we think about that situation of the car pulling out in front of us. How we respond to that, that's our attitude. What we do are our behaviors. And remember when I said that beliefs drive behaviors? That's absolutely the case. If you want to know what somebody, you've probably heard this before, but if you want to know what somebody truly believes, just follow them around and see what they do, right? If you truly, for instance, believe that the healthiest thing that you can do is to go to bed at a consistent time and get up early before everyone else is up, well, if you really believe that, then you also do that, right? If you really believe that certain types of food are innately toxic and therefore you don't want that in your life, well, then you're not going to eat those things on any sort of a regular basis. This is how we can evaluate that. What we get from our beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors, those are our outcomes, right? Those are just the things that happen on the back end. So if you want something as an outcome, you need to think about, what's my attitude towards this? What's my belief towards it? What do I really truly know about this whole situation? And then what am I going to do to then create the outcome? We can't just get the outcome. And how we feel through the whole thing, that's our emotions. And those also, while there are some innate emotions that are commonly triggered by one thing or the other, we still get to choose our emotions towards things, or we get to at least acknowledge our emotions, acknowledge and learn from our emotions, and then identify again with our eye on what is really my intent here, what's the outcome that I'm looking for. We get to identify what it is then that we're going to work towards, how we're going to utilize our emotions to get to that end point. Now, your bucket is essentially full of the stuff that you've encountered in life. And that can be, the more experienced we are in life, the more things are in that bucket. The younger we are, we don't have that much experience, but the bucket is still full of whatever experience that we've had. And you can't really know what's in that bucket until the bucket gets bumped, right? The bucket gets bumped and stuff spills out. Now, here we are, it's the holiday season. How much opportunity do we have for bucket bumping in the holiday season? A lot, right? We're in situations throughout this entire time where our bucket is getting bumped. And most of the time we're doing our best to keep that bucket from spilling and not letting that stuff spill out, particularly if it's things that we know are in there that we don't want to express and we don't want other people to experience us doing. But they do spill out eventually, right? And so what does spill out? Does a critical spirit spill out, lashing out at individuals or being critical of others during this period of time? Does complaining, complaining about whatever the situation is, schedule or, a person's attitude or, whatever, does complaining come out? Do you experience stress, anxiety, upset? What is it that spills out? Because those things that you express, that's what's in the bucket. It is a great way to know what's in the bucket and then to start evaluating what's in there. Again, you get to choose. And during this time, I encourage you to work to identify the things that you know aren't serving you well, the things that are whittling away at your health, because all of these responses that we have whittle away at health. And all of these things are processed by your nervous system, right? There's this intimate connection between what's going on in our mind and our body and our brain that flows through the nervous system. And we are designed to be healthy, and our bodies are incredibly smart. However, there's limitations to what we can do to our body before it creates an adaptation or a physiological change that is long-term adverse to us. And that's what in chiropractic we call subluxation. And those subluxations happen oftentimes along the spine, and that's why chiropractors check the spine. We're looking for those areas where the body has reacted with inflammation, with muscle spasm, with restriction along that spinal line that is preventing the body from appropriately telling the brain what's going on and preventing the brain from appropriately sending the messages or the impulses to the body to allow it to adapt appropriately. And that's what chiropractic does, is it identifies that, helps a person correct it, and then I believe, if used to its highest level, also helps people identify what it is in their lifestyle that is causing those things to happen, so that we can ratchet that back and ultimately not only decrease stress, but increase our ability to handle the stress that we're under. That's the chiropractic approach to it. In our office here at Bright Futures Chiropractic, we measure the nervous system. I'm not okay with only guessing. We do all sorts of tests, one of which is use technology to measure how the nervous system is behaving. I also want to look at structure, so oftentimes I utilize x-ray. We have digital x-ray here to see what's going on from a spinal structure level and identify how long issues have been there, if they are there. And I'm doing motion palpation where I'm moving the spine. I'm doing static palpation where I'm feeling how the alignment of the spine is. And we look at a person's outward posture with posture pictures and identify how that is. We do a very thorough evaluation to look exactly at how the stress response is being handled by the body. That's exactly what we're doing. And that level of service is very high. And frankly, we can't charge enough for that. But I don't even care. I want people who are curious about what that looks like to get checked by a chiropractor. And I want them to get checked by a chiropractor who takes that level of thoroughness. So if you're checking this out and you're not near me somewhere, feel free to shoot me a message or comment or email me at dr.grier@brightfutureschiro.com and say, hey, I'm in Albuquerque. Who do you know near me? I will find you somebody, because this is the season where, man, I've talked to my team already about it. There are so many people out there who are dealing with health issues that are caused by this chronic stress response that can be helped tremendously with the appropriate chiropractic approach, that I just want people to get checked. If you are near me, that entire visit that I just talked about is $185. That's really affordable considering all of the things that we do. And if you mention to me that you watched this video and heard me talk about it, I will gladly do that initial visit for just $67. So there it is. That's what I'm going to say. If you are curious about what your health looks like from a neurologic spinal standpoint and how we might be able to help improve your health and your life, absolutely give me a call. I also do complimentary consultations at any point, so give me a call about that. During this season, we've got that bucket and we've got stuff in it. The good news is we can replace what's in that bucket. We can displace what's in that bucket. So if you find that you're being critical with people or about people, you can replace that with appreciation. Anytime that the response that you reflexively go to is being critical, look for what is it that I can be appreciative of about that person. Believe me, I'm doing this slide as much for me this time of year as I am for anybody else. If we find that we're complaining about things, complaining about our situation in any way, we can replace that with gratitude, right? finding some way to be thankful for the situation that we're in and what it gives us the opportunity to do and to experience. I tell you, it can be hard. There's no doubt that it can be hard. We can replace judgment with acceptance, saying, oh, that's not right in some way, or you're doing that wrong, or whatever the response might be with, all right, that's your thing. It's not me, it's not my thing, but it's your thing. It's all right. You can replace resentment with understanding. I know that there are a lot of people this time of year that have lots of stress about family relation and getting together with family because there's resentment in there. I encourage to find that understanding and to really look those people in the eye, speak into them and say, hey, I understand you. I get you. That's all right. We can be different people. We can replace anger with forgiveness and intolerance with unconditional love. Intolerance for whatever it is that we're finding ourselves intolerant to, right? Find love in this season about that. It's your bucket, right? It's my bucket. It's your bucket. It's each of our bucket. And we get to choose what we fill it with. And therefore, we get to choose what spills out and fills the world when we get bumped with it. We have 4 limited resources. And let's talk about what those are. So, one moment. Hydration. A very important part of the holiday season, right? 4 limited resources. In other words, if you are feeling stressed about something, it is probably because one of these 4 things is being strained one way or the other. Those resources are time, energy, focus, and money. I have the opportunity to be frustrated with my technology right now, but I'm taking the opportunity to also go at a different pace here and be grateful for, okay, we can go at a slightly slower pace. Time, energy, focus, and money. And oftentimes, all of these things are being strained in any given situation. And these are the things that we need to identify. All right, where's my value system line up with these things? Do I want to sequester and protect more of my time, or more of my focus, or more of my energy, or more of my money? What is the thing that's going to allow me to thrive through this instead of be stressed by this situation that I'm in? Because your stress and your anxiety will directly correlate with the alignment that you have between your behaviors and that innate value system. So identifying what you innately value, what you find most valuable in the world to you, identifying that, and then looking back at your behaviors and saying, am I behaving in a way that is aligned with my values? There's lots of opportunity for us to misalign our values with our behaviors during this period of time. Because oftentimes we're doing things differently with our time, with our energy, with our focus, and certainly with our money than what we would really do if we said, how do I really want to do this? As opposed to, what am I expected to do because the world says that, right? Remember the grandfather and the son and the grandson and the donkey going through that town, right? If we listen to the pull of the world, we're just never going to be comfortable in our situation. We're just never going to know how to respond or react or behave in whatever situation we're in unless we take that step back and we say, okay, all of those people have their own opinions and those can be their own opinions, but that doesn't have to affect how I behave. And man, the holidays are a good time to remember that, because oftentimes we are told this is what you got to do with your time during the holidays. This is where your focus needs to be during the holidays. This is how you need to express your energy and put in your energy during the holidays. And certainly this is what you need to do with your money during the holidays, right? All of that stuff is in that set of responses that we have been conditioned to do. Just know that during this time, you get to choose. You get to do it differently if you want to do it differently, or see it fit that it can be done in a different way in your life. And I highly encourage that. I also highly encourage that if this video was valuable, please share it. Please send it to somebody who you think might be useful. It might be useful too. Share it on your full Facebook, but with all your friends, that's fine. But if you have specific people, that's what I'm really looking for, people to reach out and communicate with others on a one-to-one basis and say, hey, I thought this was a message that could be useful. So I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you, if you're curious about how your health challenges might be related to the stress response that you've been going through and how that could be affected by your spine and your nervous system health, absolutely give me a call. I will gladly give you 15 minutes of my life to talk with you about that, because that's my purpose professionally, is to help people get the most out of their health, the most out of their life because they're healthy, not allowing it, like most of us do, to whittle away and erode our stresses, to whittle away, erode away at our health unconsciously most of the time, until our health is at a place that we don't want it to be, and then we're looking at a long road of recovery. So wherever you are with your health right now, I would love to help with that. That's sincerely our passion here at Bright Futures Chiropractic. I appreciate you for hanging in there today with the video, for watching and being engaged with it, and please have a great, joyful, celebratory holiday season full of connection with those that you love and those things that you know are most important to you. Thanks very much. Enjoy the season.